this video, we're discussing all of the vehicles that you're not allowed to play, the rarest content in the game, and things you didn't even know existed. This is the hidden vehicles iceberg. The vehicles that are in the game files but aren't actually playable, you might not actually realize are even there. Like, some of the stuff is just not available because it was for a specific event, like for example the biathlon vehicles or the M18 that's used for the racing every Halloween. Nobody really knows why, but for some reason there's the best part of a dozen H75 variants sitting in the game files completely unused for some reason. I think one of the more interesting things is the fact that there's a completely unused B-17 and B-24 bombers for Germany sitting in the game files. There's also a German camouflage for a P-51D5 sitting in the files, and this isn't a fully playable vehicle, but you can still apply the camouflage to the regular P-51 in the American tech tree. I think now that we've seen the introduction of the ME-264, it's not really that necessary for Germany to get copy and paste long-range strategic bombers from the American tech tree, and although it would be interesting to see a P-51 in the German air tech tree, I doubt it would be anything remarkable or particularly unique compared to the other P-51s we have in the game. Do keep in mind that just because there's unused assets in the game, it doesn't really mean that there's any chance of them ever coming to the game, but something that I think would actually be quite good is if they added the unused BT5 for China to the tech tree. Now, obviously a BT5 on its own is not that interesting, as we've already got one in the Russian tech tree, but I think if it's added to China, it'll make for a very interesting lineup, as you'll be able to play it alongside things like the American M8 armoured car, and it would be a pretty fun time. When you reach the higher battle ratings of ground forces in War Thunder, the scouting light vehicles get access to a unique mechanic in of the fact you get a scout's drone. What you might not realise is that there's a special version of this available in the game files that's fully flyable, and it's not what you'd probably expect. This quadcopter was initially added for one of the April Fool's events with the mechanised infantry running around the place. The UAV is called Raven's Eye, and don't worry too much about that Golden Eagle price. Every vehicle just has an assigned value in the game files somewhere, so I doubt they would sell it for 10,000 GE. The physics of the drone are really fun, and I'd actually recommend switching into one of the more simulator flight schemes to fly it around, as it's just a little bit easier to control this very unique way of flying around. And there was a few rare times when I crashed, and instead of exploding I just bounced off the ground, which was quite funny to see. The drone has a camera just like the regular scout drone. It has a pretty decent amount of zoom. Unfortunately, the only way that we can actually fly this quadcopter is on the one specific test flight map for America, so although it would be nice to create a custom mission with obstacles to fly between, I don't think this is technically possible at this point. If there is a way, I'd love to hear about it, and so would the rest of the technical War Thunder community, but for now we're limited to the US test flight map, which does at least have some hangars to try and do some FPV drone flying through. It would be really cool if you had the option to pick between which kind of scout drone you chose to fly out. There's nothing quite like this quadcopter found anywhere else in the game in the way it flies, so I do hope it comes to the game at some point, but for now it's just genuinely quite fun to fly around, even just in a test flight. With the Sturmtiger event, there was actually access to a very special vehicle that you can no longer play, called the Goliath. This is basically a remote-controlled bomb that you can drive around and explode under tanks. It's a real vehicle that was actually used in World War II, and it's the World War II equivalent of an RCXD from Call of Duty. It's a really interesting vehicle, and it'd be really cool to see it come back in some form or another. On the console versions of War Thunder, there's exclusive vehicles that you can only access by being a console player. Now, personally, I play on PC, but there's nothing stopping me from creating an Xbox and PlayStation account specifically to play these vehicles. On Xbox, you get access to an F4U4B Corsair from the VMF 214 Squadron. This aircraft is essentially identical to the tech tree version that you can find on both PC and Xbox, aside from the premium bonuses that you get with the premium version. At the moment, both of the aircraft have the same battle rating, but for quite a period of time, the tech tree version was actually a battle rating bracket higher, which meant you got the exact same plane effectively for just a lower battle rating, which was a little bit unfair. The Xbox exclusive version of the XM1, the XM1 Chrysler, is actually slightly different from the General Motors version. It is slightly lower battle rating, and it's probably not really deserved. Notably, the Chrysler doesn't get access to hydraulic suspension control, and has a marginally slower turret traverse speed, but it's not the kind of speed difference that you would notice unless you were looking at statistic cards. Also, a little fun fact, if you didn't know already, is that when you make a brand new account in War Thunder, your first couple battles are against bots, and these are called newbie battles. I think the idea is that there'll be a few human players on your team, and then you'll fight against an enemy of bots, and then the rest of your team will be filled out by bots. But because I was playing at 9.0, there was no one else to be on my team, so I was effectively just put into a custom battle versus bots. And the interesting thing is that it is still completely possible to get a nuke in these battles. I feel like I've unlocked some sort of secret achievement or something. The two tanks have ever so slightly different engines, but the actual real world off-the-line performance is near identical. For some reason as well, there's a bit of a discrepancy when it comes to the reserve ammunition on the machine guns. The Chrysler tank version is missing a few thousand rounds of ammunition for some reason. Other than that, the tanks play the same, fire the same round, have the same reload. They are essentially the same vehicle. Although personally, I definitely prefer the visual look of the General Motors tank. There's just something a bit strange about the Chrysler version. You don't see this Chrysler tank in battles too much anymore, but when it released, if you were playing the game at that time, you remember that there was an absolute onslaught, an army of these vehicles absolutely spamming top tier battle ratings at the time. This is because they decided to do a closed beta test of War Thunder on Xbox, and to get access to the closed beta, you had to buy a premium vehicle, of which there were only 3 available. The Corsair we just mentioned, the Chrysler XM1, and also the USS Benyon, which is a copy of a Fletcher class destroyer. Top tier battle ratings were completely unplayable as swarms of level 1, no backup crews, anything to respawn into. Xbox players joined the game with 0 experience, and it was awful, and I hope they never do anything like it again. The War Thunder test flight is a place I think we've all spent probably more time than we'd like to admit, and I think a common complaint is there's not a lot to do in the test flight missions. So we've all probably shot down that MiG-15 that flies in a circle a lot of times. But did you know that that MiG-15 isn't actually a MiG-15 that you can play from the tech tree? It's a special sub-variant, or at least in terms of the game files, it's a different variant of the plane. The plane is actually called a MiG-15 NS-23, which would make you think it comes equipped with only 23mm cannons, but it has the standard 37mm and two 23mm loadout. Interestingly, this is a MiG-15 at battle rating 1.0, and the modification screen is a bit strange. It even gets access to EFS, although the modification isn't actually installed on the plane. Unfortunately, we can't fly the plane, but it's interesting to look at and check out in the hangar, as it's a plane that we're all familiar with, but didn't even know was in the game. One of the worst event vehicles ever released is the PBM-3 Mariner, and I'd honestly forgotten quite how bad it was before making this video. This vehicle was released alongside the Leningrad as part of a naval-only event. It was a mark of distinction event, which was quite unusual as it only featured naval. There wasn't an air or ground element to the event. The Leningrad was made into a coupon, but what makes the PBM-3 interesting is the fact that it was never released as a coupon, and the only time it's been made available is for this event. The vehicle actually gets a huge amount of ordnance, and at some point after its release, the vehicle was also given naval mines around the time naval mines were added to the game. Base bombing in this plane is super effective. The problem is, you're so obnoxiously slow that actually getting to the bases in the first place before being intercepted by fighter aircraft is rather unlikely. Although the naval mines will one-shot a mini-base, for some reason they're incapable of doing damage to the enemy airfield. This is one of those planes that you really want to like, but it's just too slow to be fun. When it comes to exclusivity and vehicles that people absolutely adore and really want to have access to, the E100 is the one that always comes to mind. It's not the rarest vehicle in game, we'll get to that later, but if you didn't know already, it's basically a copy of a Maus super heavy tank, but the mobility is significantly upgraded, allowing you to reach speeds of 30 kilometers an hour, which is a massive improvement over the standard Maus. It's also got some slightly different add-on armor that give it a distinctive shape, and these add-on parts help a bit with protection for rounds that are affected by spaced armor. Like the Leopard 2 turret wedges, these armored side parts can actually be shot off and makes the tank a little bit more unique, as dynamic armor like this is quite an unusual feature for most tanks. Like the mouse, you get access to a 128mm cannon and a 75mm secondary. With a lot of different options for the 75, it can be super useful and complements the slow reload of the main cannon very effectively. Defensively, you can use smokes on the 75 to hide yourself from enemy vehicles, or against lightly armored vehicles, the 75mm heat shell is very effective. What's absolutely crazy about this vehicle is Gaijin have actually been able to build up the hype to such an extent that people are willing to pay 2,000 Gaijin coins, or the equivalent of quite a nice car, for a virtual video game tank. And that's bearing in mind that the maximum price for any single item on the Gaijin market is $2,000, so people are probably willing to pay even more than that. If you are someone who's looking at the E100 and wishing you had it, do try to remember that these vehicles are only rare because Gaijin arbitrarily decides that they're rare, and the release of vehicles is completely arbitrary in an abstract way. And these things only have value because you assign value to them. So try to think what actually matters in terms of what you're spending your money on. I would recommend, if you are planning to spend your money on silly things, at least do it efficiently. If you're planning to buy Golden Eagles or a premium vehicle, what you're going to want to do is click the link in the description, and that'll take you to the Gaijin store using my personal discount code, and that'll take a couple dollars off your purchase. And if you decide to buy more stuff in the future, that same link will keep on working. It's not just a one-time thing, and every single time you purchase something on that link, I see a small percentage of that, so you are supporting the channel as well by buying stuff for yourself in-game. And on top of that, you do get access to the best decal in-game that can make any plane look absolutely mental. So commit it to memory, or better yet, make a bookmark in your browser, and every single time you use that same link, you'll get a little discount on every single purchase you make on the Gaijin store, and you'll help support me in making these videos. When you get to the higher battle ratings of naval ships and get to bigger and bigger ships, you get access to fly-out scout aircraft. You can see these by simply unlocking the modification and flying them out in random battles. However, there are two hidden versions of these planes, the Fairy 3F Mark 3B and the O3U1. I do quite like the design of the Fairy, and the plane is equipped with 4 250-pound bombs as well as a singular Vickers K 7.7mm machine gun. The O3U1 is also equipped with a singular 7.7 as well as access to 2 100-pound bombs. I guess we might see these vehicles be playable in the future with more and more naval ships being added to the game, although I'm not too sure on the specific ship that we would need to be added for these vehicles to be playable in random battles. PlayStation players have got the option of purchasing an exclusive A26 only available on the PlayStation Store, and it looks something a little bit like this. Except, no it doesn't. This is actually what the PlayStation version of the aircraft looks like. The 45DT A26 is the PlayStation vehicle, whereas the 45 with no letters on the end is a vehicle available on PC as well. Unfortunately, it was last available in 2016 as part of a Facebook quiz, so this one is quite rare. The two aircraft are near identical, where the PlayStation exclusive version gets access to HVARs, and apart from that, the camouflage is the same, the flight performance is the same. These are effectively the same aircraft. Unlike Xbox, if you decide to convert your console account to a PC account, you'll actually lose access to your exclusive A26, which makes it kind of funny when there's effectively a copy and paste version of the plane on PC already, albeit significantly rare and not been given out for a very long time. What makes these rare versions of the A26 interesting is that they're actually given the bomber designation. You'll find that the tech tree versions of the A26 are classed as attackers, which means in aerialistic battles, the air spawn that you get is at a significantly lower altitude. And as you know already, when it comes to energy, altitude is half of the equation, so having more of it just makes the plane better. Transportation aircraft are hidden within the game files, and if you know where to look, there are actually ways to see them in a live battle. The Lee-5, the Ju-52 and the C-47 are all transport aircraft. These vehicles don't really have any offensive weaponry and obviously don't really make sense as vehicles that could be added to the game as a normal playable vehicle in aerialistic battles. They could be added as an event vehicle similar to the Po-2, where it's basically just for bombing and a little bit of fun. We can check them out in the hangar, and for some reason the Lee-2 is missing its landing gear, but if you want to see them in an actual battle, you're going to have to head into War Thunder's single player player content. If you didn't know already, War Thunder's got a bunch of legacy content that's either entirely single player or you and a couple friends in a PvE scenario. On screen are the names of the missions you want to find if you want to see these vehicles in game. The Lee 5 mission is probably the most boring and has you just simply escort an aircraft. You get attacked by a few enemy aircraft, but really not a lot happens in this mission. The Ju-52 can be found on the mission Divide and Conquer, and you basically just take out a bunch of enemy aircraft and then randomly as a secondary objective, a Ju-52 spawns. The C-47 mission out of the three is probably the most fun, as you get to fly the Me-262 and using the 30mm to shoot down waves of C-47s who are trying to resupply surrounded enemy troops on the ground. It's not that interesting as a mission on its own, but trying to get some long-range snipes with the 30mm cannons is quite satisfying. It wasn't until relatively recently with the La Royale update, the Ju-52 and C-47 received high-resolution model upgrades. Although, even at the time, people sort of thought this was more related to Enlisted rather than War Thunder, so I wouldn't expect many changes coming to War Thunder in terms of these transport aircraft. When War Thunder began, it was only air-to-air combat, but at some point, obviously, Ground Forces was introduced, and at the beginning of Ground Forces, there was only 2 vehicles available. To get access to the closed beta, you had to purchase an M4A2 Sherman for Germany or a prototype T-34. These vehicles are rare in the sense that you'll basically never see them in a battle, and the only way to get access to them is around once a year for Gaijin's birthday. You'll have the opportunity to actually purchase the tanks, although they'll only ever sell 500 or 1,000 at a time. So if you do want to get one, you're going to have to be very quick as they sell out super fast. And they're not cheap either. These vehicles are rank 3 and rank 2 respectively, and when they do go on sale, they cost €50. The T-34 is pretty much identical to the tech tree version of the tank, except it has a lamp. So to be honest, unless you're just some insane collector, it really isn't worth buying. The German Sherman, however, does have some value in the fact that you get a Sherman in the German tech tree that slots into the infamously powerful 4.0 lineup, but for almost everyone, you're going to have to have bought a lot of other things to get to the point where buying literally anything else isn't a better choice. One of the early esports events for War Thunder was Thunder League, and it actually included access to a bunch of premium vehicles. You're probably familiar already with RBT5, T5 and BF109 E7U2, as although these vehicles were originally available during this dog tag event, they have found their way back into the game via the Gaijin market and the skin loot crates that you can get access to. However, not all of these vehicles that were included in the Thunder League event have made it back to the game, and there's functionally no way to obtain them at the moment. The P51A is a P51 that gets access to a much lower battle rating than the other P51s. It gets 4 Browning machine guns, and at some point recently it actually got a slight buff where it gained access to having droppable ordnance, 2 500-pound bombs. It comes equipped with a quite unique camouflage pattern as the only available camouflage. It's a fun plane to play, and with its new bombs, it's definitely something worth considering taking out if you're playing ground forces at around the battle rating of 3.0. The other vehicle from this dog tag event that has kind of been forgotten is the M24TL. The M24TL, however, is certainly a lot less interesting. This is just a copy and paste of a Chaffee M24 tank, except this one gets access to an APCR round, and you don't need to play War Thunder for long to know that that's not really that useful. The Chaffee is obviously a very good vehicle with a fantastic APHE round and good mobility as well as a stabilizer, and I guess it's nice to have a second one to respawn into if you're particularly interested in playing Chaffies, but other than that, if you don't have this vehicle, you're honestly not missing out on much. Despite not looking particularly unique, the Lag 34 is one of the most, if not the rarest vehicle in the game. You'll find this aircraft in rank 2 at battle rating 2.3. You get access to a 20mm Shavac cannon as well as a 50 cal and 2 7.62 machine guns. Interestingly, this is one of those planes that you actually get access to having a Finnish camouflage despite it not actually being in the Swedish tech tree, as this was added to the game much before the Finnish and Swedish tech trees were ever in the game. Unfortunately, you don't get access to any sort of secondary weapons like bombs or rockets. The reason why this aircraft is so rare is because it's basically impossible to get your hands on. The aircraft has been in the game since the very beginning of War Thunder, and it's only given out to developers and people who are very close to Gaijin. Keep in mind, it is a little bit confusing as there are some similar rare lag aircraft. The developer only lag is the lag 3.4, but there is the lag 3.23 and the lag 3.34. And while both of these lags are both premium and particularly quite rare as they're only being given out in a very few situations, they aren't on the same level as the lag 3.4. Anytime these aircraft are discussed, there's inevitably someone who gets confused. And to be honest, I don't blame them. They're very, very similar planes. Unfortunately, unless you somehow become a game developer at Gaijin, you're not unlocking this aircraft anytime soon. Now, I really hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, you're definitely going to want to click here to watch the iceberg more related to some more general topics in War Thunder. Don't forget to subscribe and make sure to use my link in the description anytime you're making a purchase. Subscribe.